In January 1915, a wooden ship called the Endurance became trapped in the pack ice of the Weddell Sea, off the coast of Antarctica. For 10 months, 28 men lived aboard the ship, while the ice slowly crushed it around them. When the hull finally splintered and the ship sank, their captain looked at the frozen sea, looked at his crew, and started walking. Some expeditions fail because of bad planning. Some fail because of bad luck. These failed in ways their leaders could not have imagined, and the question of survival came down to what happened after everything went wrong. 4 doomed expeditions. Not all of them made it home. Ernest Shackleton's Imperial Trans-Antarctic Expedition was supposed to be the first land crossing of Antarctica. He had recruited 27 men, packed the Endurance with enough supplies for 2 years, and sailed from South Georgia Island in December 1914. Within 6 weeks, the ship was frozen solid in the Weddell Sea pack ice. The ice was not stationary. It was a moving field of pressure, grinding and shifting with the currents, and the Endurance was caught in the middle of it like a walnut in a vise. For 10 months, the crew lived on the trapped ship, while the ice slowly compressed the hull. The timbers groaned and cracked. Water leaked through the seams. On October 27, 1915, Shackleton gave the order to abandon ship. The crew salvaged 3 lifeboats, food, and camping equipment, and set up camp on the ice floe. A month later, they watched the Endurance break apart and sink beneath the frozen surface. They were stranded on drifting ice with no ship, no radio, and no one in the world who knew where they were. Shackleton led his men across the ice for 5 months, dragging the lifeboats on sleds, camping on floes that split apart under them in the night. When the ice finally broke up enough to launch the boats, they sailed through open ocean to Elephant Island, a barren, uninhabited rock at the edge of the Antarctic Peninsula. They were alive, but no ship would ever find them there. Shackleton made a decision that most navigators would have called suicide. He took 5 men and the strongest lifeboat, a 22-foot open boat called the James Caird, and set out across 800 miles of the most violent ocean on Earth to reach the whaling station at South Georgia Island. They navigated by sextant and dead reckoning through hurricane-force winds and waves that rose 40 feet above them. The voyage took 16 days. When they reached South Georgia, they landed on the wrong side of the island and had to cross an unmapped mountain range on foot with no climbing equipment. Shackleton reached the whaling station looking so ragged that the first person he met did not recognize him. He had visited the same station 2 years earlier. He organized a rescue ship and went back for the men on Elephant Island. They had been surviving under 2 overturned lifeboats for over 4 months, eating seals, penguins, and whatever they could scavenge from the barren rock. Every single one of them was still alive. Not one member of the expedition died. The next expedition was not so lucky. In April 1846, a group of 87 American pioneers, led by George Donner and James Reed, left Springfield, Illinois, headed for California. They were families, men, women, and children, with wagons loaded with furniture, food, and everything they owned. At Fort Bridger in Wyoming, they made the decision that killed them. They took a shortcut. The Hastings Cutoff was a route promoted by a land speculator named Lansford Hastings, who had written a guidebook about emigrating to California from the comfort of his desk. He claimed the cutoff would save 300 miles off the traditional trail. He had ridden the route once on horseback, but he had never actually taken it with wagons. The shortcut led the Donner Party through the Wasatch Mountains, where they had to hack a road through dense forest with axes, and then across the Great Salt Lake Desert, an 80-mile stretch of blinding white salt flats with no water. The crossing took 6 days instead of the expected 2. Oxen died of thirst. Wagons had to be abandoned. By the time they reached the Sierra Nevada in late October, they had lost weeks they could not afford. The first snow hit on October 31st. The pass was blocked. 81 people were trapped at Truckee Lake at an elevation of nearly 6,000 feet, with dwindling food and no way through the mountains. The snow kept falling. By December, it was 20 feet deep. The cabins were buried. They ate the oxen first, then the dogs, then boiled rawhide from shoes and blankets into a tasteless jelly they could barely choke down. A group of 15 attempted to cross the pass on improvised snowshoes. 8 days in, starving and freezing, the survivors began eating the bodies of those who had died on the trail. Back at the lake camp, the remaining families held out as long as they could before they too began eating the dead. A rescue party finally reached the camp in mid-February 1847. Of the 87 people who had started the journey, 48 survived. The next expedition ended in something worse than starvation. In October 1628, the Batavia set sail from the Netherlands for the Dutch East Indies, carrying over 300 passengers and crew, along with a fortune in silver coins meant for trade. The ship's commander was Francisco Pelsart. His second in command was a merchant named Geronimus Cornelis, who had joined the voyage to escape debts and a heresy investigation back home. Cornelis had been planning a mutiny before the ship ever left port. On June 4th, 1629, the Batavia struck a reef in the Houtmian Abrolhos, a chain of coral islands off the western coast of Australia. The ship broke apart. Most of the passengers and crew made it to the islands, but there was almost no fresh water and no food beyond what they could salvage from the wreck. Pelsart took a small boat and sailed over 1,900 miles to the nearest Dutch settlement in Java to get help. He left Cornelis in charge. With Pelsart gone, Cornelis seized total control. He disarmed the soldiers, separated anyone he considered a threat onto a neighboring island with no supplies, and began systematically murdering the remaining survivors. Over the next 3 months, Cornelis and his followers killed over 110 men, women, and children by drowning, throat-cutting, and bludgeoning. He assigned murder duties to his followers as loyalty tests. Anyone who refused to participate was killed next. He kept a small group of women alive as captives and distributed them among his inner circle. The soldiers he had exiled to the neighboring island survived by finding water and hunting seals, and they built coral fortifications when Cornelis sent men to kill them. When Pelsart finally returned with a rescue ship in September, the soldiers flagged him down first and told him everything. Cornelis was captured, tried, and executed on the island. His hands were cut off before he was hanged. The next expedition vanished entirely. In May 1845, the HMS Erebus and HMS Terror sailed from England under the command of Sir John Franklin with 129 men, bound for the Arctic to chart the final section of the Northwest Passage. The ships were the most technologically advanced polar vessels of their time, reinforced hulls, steam engines, and enough canned provisions for 3 years. They were last seen by European whalers in Baffin Bay in July 1845. After that, nothing. Search expeditions sent over the following decades pieced together fragments of what happened. The ships became trapped in the ice near King William Island in September 1846 and never broke free. The crew spent 2 winters locked in the ice. Franklin died in June 1847. The cause was never determined. Later analysis of crew remains found elevated lead levels, likely from the expedition's poorly soldered food tins, which may have contributed to confusion, poor decision-making, and the collapse of discipline. The surviving crew abandoned the ships in April 1848 and attempted to walk south to a Hudson's Bay Company outpost over 1,000 miles away. None of them made it. Inuit hunters later reported finding camps, bodies, and abandoned equipment scattered along the southern coast of King William Island and the Adelaide Peninsula. Some of the bodies were found in groups, suggesting they had collapsed together. The bones showed cut marks consistent with butchering. Forensic analysis of the remains confirmed evidence of cannibalism among the final survivors. The 2 ships sat on the ocean floor for over 160 years before the Erebus was found in 2014 and the Terror in 2016, both remarkably preserved in the frigid Arctic water. 129 men had sailed into the ice with the best equipment their era could provide, and the Arctic swallowed every single one of them. A crew that walked off the ice alive, a wagon train that ate its dead, a shipwreck that became a massacre, an entire expedition that vanished into the Arctic and was not found for 170 years. 4 journeys that went further than anyone planned, and not always in the direction they intended. Subscribe and hit the bell. Next episode, a math cult murdered someone for proving the wrong kind of number existed. BareBones. Simple stories about the weirdest things that actually happened.